We're live. Just sitting there, mind my own business. We are live, 9 o'clock in the morning. It's your morning motivation for you to go out and get something done on one or more of your projects, even one or two things on a couple of projects, because we all know you guys have a couple of projects, because everybody has a couple of projects, right? I'm sure that you do. Let's see, taking care of a little business here. You and I. So hopefully everybody's doing well this morning. Everybody's all motivated. Everybody wants to get stuff done. What we're going to talk about today is the photo that I put up as a thumbnail of the intercooler that we use. It's an air to water. I think it was a MONDO cooler from VORTECH way back in the day. We've used this thing for a few different things. But what I wanted to do and what our poll will be for today is let's not do that just yet. So we'll wait till our peeps get here. So we're gonna go over to live chat. That's where everybody's disconnected. So the question is, what is wrong with this picture? So what is wrong with the thumbnail? What is wrong with the photo? What could we change to make it will be interesting who gets, and then later on in a little bit we'll get into the poll, because the poll will have to do with what I'm talking about. We'll give you a chance to answer a couple of the questions. What you're looking at is an air to water intercooler, and it's a MONDO cooler, and you're looking at one side of it. It's we looked at this photo from the other side last night or yesterday, because I was talking about the fact that we had used this on a carbureted blow through thing, and the thing's all upside down and cattywampus, and so it's not it's not being used ideally. But there's something that's glaringly obvious on here, and so let me know what you guys think is what's going on there. What can we do to make this thing better? What can we do to make it better? Everything needs to be better, right? Everything can be better. So take a look at the photo and let me know. We'll see what you guys got going on. I do like running. We normally run air to water intercoolers. I've run air to air intercoolers on the dyno. In fact, I've even done, if you guys haven't seen them, I've done videos where we compared the air to water intercooler they normally use, which is the Pro Charger unit. I'm sure that they sourced it from somebody else. And then we ran an air-to-air intercooler, which I also think was a Pro Charger one that we used for we had done one of their centrifugal superchargers with an air-to-air intercooler. In fact, I have a video up where we compared their smaller version to the bigger version, one that flows more and has bigger inlets and outlets and bigger tanks and stuff and a thicker core. And we showed a pretty good gain going on an intercooler upgrade. That was near the 1,000 horsepower level. So it's obviously a pretty high level of both flow and power. And so when we did the intercooler upgrade, we picked up good power. We picked up boost, obviously, because it was less of a restriction. We picked up cooling. It just was, everything was better at that flow and power level. The intercooler that we use, it was still making, 950 or something. And so it's still doing okay. It's just that it jumped up over 1,000 when we did the intercooler upgrade. And we picked up boost. So since we're measuring boost in the manifold, what you see is that the intercooler itself became a restriction. But I also did, and that was the far segue. So now we'll go to the next step in our segue. We have a multiple angle segue going on here. And so then I've also done a test where we ran the air to air intercooler versus the air to water intercooler we run dyno water, which is, 85 degrees or something, depending on what the temperature of the day is, because it comes from a big reservoir, a big tank, a 2,500 gallon tank. We could also, excuse me, the thing that I have wanted to do for a long time is I wanted to run water from the taps, because it's going to be about 55 or 60 degrees, it seems like, when it comes out of there. So that would make it even cooler. And then when we want to do it, ideally we run ice water, but running an air to water intercourse much easier on the dyno, because it's easier to configure. You don't have to worry about getting giant fans to get airflow through it and all of that. But quite honestly, on a one-run deal, the air-to-water intercooler, even without a fan on it, works fairly well. And so I did a comparison between the air-to-water versus the air-to-air, and I meant the air-to-air even without a fan on it. It does fairly well. There's a lot of airflow going through the dynacell. But, you know, we get complaints when I do that, oh, you don't have the 200 mile an hour air. I'm like, yeah, your car isn't at 200 miles an hour at the starting line or for the staging or in any of that. So, but we wanted to make sure that it works. And so I did a comparison with the air-to-air with a dedicated big squirrel cage fan on it, and then the air-to-water. And they were very, very comparable at the power level that we tested it at the boost level and stuff. And so both of them work. The important thing isn't, if you're looking at an absolute, you want an air-to-water with ice water. And then you have to talk about, like we've talked about many times, you have to talk about all the other things. That's the absolute deal. If you can get the colder you can get the charge air, the better it is. So anything that you can do to make the air really, really cold, which you're not going to do with an air-to-air, you're going to be able to do that with an air-to-water. It will be able to get colder. So ultimately, that's it. But lots of weight and complexity, and you need to talk about all that stuff. So do you need that? And also, do you need that to get done what you need to get done? If you're running E85 and you're running a blow-through carburetor and you got an air-to-air on it, your chances are you're pretty good. Or if you're running methanol, lots of guys don't run intercoolers at all. So again, we have to ask the right question when we're talking about this. But the air-to-air, air-to-water, both of them work well when they're sized correctly for their applications. If I was running out on a road course or whatever, I would have an air-to-air. If I was running the Silver State, I would have an air-to-air. If I'm running at a drag strip or Bonneville, we normally run an air-to-water, and all of them are good. And this one is an air-to-water that the VORTECH guys had, and it was designed for very high horsepower applications. It was designed actually to bolt onto a carbureted style manifold, and it works very well if you run port injection on the carbureted style manifold, like if you have a converted Victor Jr. or that kind of thing. It works very well. The question is, let's see if anybody has how small the math is. No, there's no mass air meter on it. There's a big throttle body on it. The throttle body, I think, is probably a 90 millimeter. So blowing through a 90 millimeter, we could make a few thousand horsepower with that. Let's see. Have you tested ice water versus ambient in an air-to-water? Yes, many times. And ice water is always much better. There in the picture, there are three intercooler cores used in this big igloo. It's the core that they use. They use a single core like that for in a 5-liter Mustang kit. So you can have an air-to-water intercooler, and you can have that as a kit, and then they have a single core. This one uses 3 of those because then you can have, you have a lot more surface area, a lot more flow. And so there are 3 of them there. And this one was run with this was a VORTECH intercooler, aftercooler, they call it, but it was run with a turbo because we needed some form of intercooling. So let's see what we got going on. Stabilization mode there. Okay, so what's happening here is the air is going in from the turbo into the 90-degree elbow, down into the 3. You can see 3 distinct cores on the intercooler. There are 3 sets of hoses going in there, 3 sets of 2 ins and outs. There are 3 cores. It's a big box, basically. It's blowing air through that and then actually going into another box. It's a carburetor enclosure. And so it's all of this intercooled air is blowing into the carburetor box now, and it's going to go through the carburetor and then into the motor. Does ice water affect the tune? Yes, it will definitely need more fuel. It will definitely need more fuel. So nobody seems to have gotten it so far, and maybe you guys might be looking at it on your phone. So I would request or recommend that you make the picture bigger so you can see it. But take a look specifically at the routing of the cooling lines, of the water lines. So look specifically at that. This will give you a hint. Okay, so the poll for today is, does a double pass water system on the intercooler reduce cooling efficiency? And what do I mean by a double pass? Well, that means that the water has to go in one side of the core and then turn around at the end and then come back out of the core. So if you can see the way that these are configured, I have 3 different cores here. So we have water going in and then coming back out. So we're forcing water in and coming back out. But here's the thing, as the water goes in to one side of the core and you have got hot air going through it, it's taking that heat out, but it's also heating that water up. And then the water has to go and make a turn, and then the water becomes hotter on the other side of that, and then it still has hot air going through it. So you would think, let me know what you guys think, does that make the total overall cooling less effective? There you go, JPL. You got it. Somebody finally two on the outside won't flow. No, they all flow pretty well. But the JPL got it. What it is the way that I routed this water, and this is important for people, is that if you look very closely, I have on the 2 outer cores, I have a water feed going in, and then it goes in and does the double pass, like I said. But now it's actually going out of one core and into another core, and then out that core. So it's a quadruple pass on the 2 outer cores, and then the center core just has an in and an out. Lucky for me, I mean, and in this situation, we weren't running a lot of boost, and we're running fairly cold water. We weren't running ice water on this. We were still running. I think that this was done during the winter, I think. So this water was probably like 65 or 66 degrees. So it was plenty cold for what we were doing. But if you look at one of them, one of the intercoolers is looped into the other one. And so it's whatever intercooler is second in that flow rotation, it's going to get hotter water than it did originally. So making it, less effective. And I agree, people are talking about using salt water, which will make it cooler, but I don't like using salt water and stuff. Do you have temperature in and out of the intercooler? I'd have to go back and look and see if we have charge temperatures. Day Trade Scotty, you're the other you. You're the coy you. Don't be coy. There's a reason I never looped my CPU after my GPU and my PC. You've heard the double pass is better. How could it possibly be better? It'd be much better to have water go in. In this instance, it would be much better if we had both of these as ins on one side and 2 outs on the other side, or even a single big out on the other side. You'd have a much cooler transfer medium in the intercooler all the time, and that's what you would want to go for. Richard, have you done something like this before? Because I do have room enough to add a second air-to-water intercooler. I actually ran my air-to-air into an air-to-water for a bit and did the math. It wasn't keeping the air to, and it wasn't worth keeping the air to air. You should take a look, and I would run the air to air first because it's going to do less effective of a job, and then your transfer medium in the air to air might be colder. So if we have run 2 intercoolers on it. We did on the Jetta. Both of them were air to water. And we did get better cooling. They just need to be sized so that you don't have big flow restrictions, because that's what you'd be worried about. But if you oversize the intercooler, that's not really a problem. And you will get more cooling. It's just that you'll get most of the cooling from the first intercooler, and then a fairly significant percentage drop less cooling from the second one, because it's already trying to cool air. So you're not going to get drop 150 degrees from the first intercooler and then drop another 150. You might drop 150 from the first one and then 40 or 50 from the second one. But that's still good. That's still a good drop, and it's definitely worthwhile. Or just use ice water in one of them. Can you use dry ice to make the water colder? No, dry ice and water actually doesn't work very well. Dry ice just tends to outgas. Yeah, Ricky, that's actually the question. Does it really matter? You're cooling the hell out of this thing. We have more than enough cooling. We're only running like 13 pounds or something. And we had extra charge cooling because this was a blow through carbureted application. And then the other thing that happens on this situation that doesn't happen normally is this intercooler in between pulls is constantly being flushed by cold water, because we have an unlimited source essentially of cold water. So it's not being recirculated. Hot water is not being recirculated, or even hot water, which is then being cooled by ambient air in the front of your heat exchanger and then being recirculated back through this. So this thing runs and it makes a pull, and then we look at the data or whatever, make a tune or whatever, and then we make another pull. And usually we have to put more heat in the turbo to get the thing to be stabilized and get it to be repeatable. And so, but the constant circulation of cold water through this on the engine dyno really negates any of this stuff anyways. And like I said, we've got way more cooling than we need. We have way more. The water temperature is great. We're making one pull at a time and not running it sustained. So Scotty, excuse me. I'm up for today right now. Oh, look at Tesla's rising, shooting up right now. I prefer white vinegar on rice. I mean, on front heat exchanger, a lot of companies are pushing double pass heat exchangers. I knew of the outgas issue. I just didn't know if the dry ice would transfer to the water. It doesn't really make the water much colder. I don't know if it makes it any colder, because the problem is, since this is outgassing, the water's not actually touching the dry ice. Have you ever drained and filled a tank for air to water intercooler? Usually water gets somewhere no matter how careful, then it runs, and you have salt water on the inside of the car. Yeah, I know Peter. Yeah, you're talking to Peter. Yeah, the salt water is just not good. We deal with enough salt at Bonneville that we always try to get it off of everything after we leave the salt. But yeah, having it in the car. And again, in our case, we have a 10-gallon cell full of ice water. And we have charge temperatures under boost that are less than ambient. So we have a pretty good setup there. What's a good water pressure level? I honestly, I've never measured water pressure in our systems. We just we make sure that I judge it by the amount of flow coming out of the return side back into like when we're looking at we have 3/4 inch lines or 1 inch lines running from the intercooler back to run back into the big 10-gallon cell, like on the Bonneville or the Civic that we had for Bonneville. And I just measure it by the outflow of the thing, what looks like enough, and then I base that and then vary that versus temperature, the temperature drop. Do coolant additives work? I don't run them normally in our intercoolers, but I do like water wetter in the radiator though. Michael, you just watched Calvin's deal, the crash? He did a triple Lindy. Extra interesting topic to me. I have most of the hot side for my 2001 Silverado. Packaging is an issue, even with complete kits. Heat is an issue here in Florida. That's right. And that becomes an issue. That's why I always stress that people don't grab underhood air from your motor. It's really bad. Cold air is definitely much better. Back in the day, I used a 50-50 mix of ethanol and water for computer cooling. It did better than water antifreeze in my tests, but the alcohol tended to evaporate out. I would think that would be. Does it evaporate out in a closed system? Because isn't that system all sealed? Can the alcohol actually get out of that? How's our poll doing? 53% does a double pass water system in the intercooler reduce cooling efficiency. 53% are saying no. Yeah, Scott, he was trying to get style points, playing for the crowd. Michael, okay, the alcohol found its way out through the hose connections. Stupid connections. What about water-cooled turbos cooled by the engine coolant, reliable on a daily driver? Yes, 100%. That's a good idea. Because what you're doing is, even if your water temperature, say, is 190 or 200 degrees, the turbos can get 1100 degrees. so it's much cooler. I'm thinking on the compound project with 4 air to water intercoolers, I might run a rear mount radiator, 9 psi transfer pump. Yeah, if you put a little bit of pressure in there, you can help heat transfer. If water cooled turbos, this gives you any idea, the turbo that's on the 85 Dodge, this was probably an 86 or an 87 turbo, but so it was 1 year later. But the turbo that's on there is an original factory turbo. I don't think it's ever been rebuilt, and it was water cooled from the factory. What happens if you put a water spray in front of the air-to-air intercooler? That helps. That can help. Guys do CO2 on them. Some guys do nitrous, although you have to be concerned about it not getting into the motor. It helps power a lot, but you have to make sure the tune would be spot on for that. But yeah, missing the air-to-air helps. Turbo Center, a 2-gallon water tank would be big enough for my engine. if it's filled full of ice, and you don't turn it on except right before the run, then yes. That's what we do at Bonneville. We do not run the intercooler pumps until we're ready to go make the pass. So we turn it on. That's one of our pre-flight checklists is we have the trunk that's open. We turn the pumps on right before we're getting ready, like when it's our time, like after the guy in front of us has gone and we're pulling up to stage for the start. We pull up there and then we open the back, we turn the pumps on, we verify that the pumps are pumping, we take a look and physically see that the pump is pumping, shut the thing, and then we're ready to make a run. Say on the chili bomb, would the water inlet on the engine side be better than on the turbo side? I would make the water go in closest to the source of heat. So I would make the water go into the intercooler closer to the turbo, because the way it goes in and out on the same side on the chili bomb, I'm pretty sure. And so I'd have the water go in on where the turbo is blowing into the intercooler, because that's where the most heat is. So that's where you want the most cold. And then the water flows through the core and then comes out. I'm thinking of skipping air to air, high ram with a tick air to water between the lower intake and plenum. Water tank, water cooled turbo, maybe heat exchanger in the mix. Yeah, all that works. They make nitrous rings for the intercooler. I have one if you're interested in it, because I've done a test with it and it's just been sitting since then. Air to water seems like a good idea, but not on the street. I loved mine on my Sprint. Just uses a lot of nitrous, that way it burns. I'd rather spray it in the engine. Yeah. I don't recommend using nitrous. If you're going to do something, use CO2, because it's going to be less expensive than nitrous, and you don't have to worry about it. Well, you don't want that getting in the motor either, but. And Turbo Centra, if you run a 2-gallon cell and don't turn it on until you make your start and run it, see how much ice is left at the end. That should tell you if all the ice is gone after your run, you need a bigger reservoir. If there's still ice in there and the water is still cold, then you're good. On my Sprint, I had a secondary heat exchanger up front, and it kept the water near ambient. Does gapping the rings on an NALS lose power without the rings? No. How do you keep water cool on the street? Well, like I said, we have a secondary heat exchanger that's mounted up in front of the radiator that while you're driving gets nothing but air blown on it. And the water doesn't heat up except for unless your reservoir is in the engine compartment. So you're not under boost. You're not running around all the time under boost where you're heating the water up. Most of the time you're not, as a matter of fact. I'd say 95% of the time, if this is a daily driver, you're not running boost. Great info, Richard. Maybe more details on the Sprint. I have I've shown videos of photos of the Sprint engine bay that shows the air to water intercooler, and then we just routed a pump, and the reservoir that I used was a 1 gallon or 2 gallon plastic gas can. It's plastic. It's a very, very good insulator. We mounted it in the engine bay. We did that because we were trying to configure something at the track one time when we were doing the land speed stuff. And I talked about not liking it because it has the gas cap hole is small, and so you can only stick one ice cube at a time. It was a real pain. But I use that system just driving around every day, and with just water in it, not with ice in it, and just water in it, and with a secondary heat exchanger, we used a little oil cooler up front, and we just plumbed water through it and just circulated the water, and it worked great. It worked way better than the air-to-air did. Can you run a carburetor with a choke as a blow-through combination for a daily driver? Yes, I would think so. You're just using the choke for startup and stuff, right? The thing that I don't know about is I'd have to look and see how the choke is configured to say. I don't know if positive pressure is going to want to push that thing closed. Wondering how well the water is going to flow through the chili bomb, if it's going to cool on one side. I don't know what the internal passage looks like on the chili bomb. I don't think the water is just going to go from one opening to the other, but we'll see. We'll see how well it cools. I would hope that they put a divider between the two inlets and outlets, between the inlet and the outlet. Let's see here. Use a cooler as a water reservoir. Yeah, even the 10-gallon cell we had with the big like gas cap that you spin off. I wanted to put a hinge lid on it and just flip it open. But I like the fact that it was a fuel cell that was, that we could secure down, because you have tech inspection for that. I got to make sure everything's safe, and if the car flips over, that's not all the stuff's not going to come out. Looks like you have 3 core elements that are connected in series. Well, 2 of them are. One of them is just connected normally, but that was the problem, Gunner. Is it's 2 of the cores. We had a double loop on that. Will the air even stay in the chili bomb long enough to cool? I think it will. I think it's going to work. My 5-gallon tank has an 8-inch opening. Good. Have you ever worked on an AC chilled intercooler? I have not tested one of those. I think air to water with a tank in the bed of the truck might work. Having a rear-mounted turbo and the bed of a truck gives you all sorts of real estate to make all of that stuff work. Here, I got to move my microphone over there. How's that? Is that better? Ricky, yeah, you want to That you want to strike the right balance between flow and temperature drop, and you're going to get a drop in pressure across the core anyway, which you have to. If you drop the temperature, you're going to change the pressure also. Yeah, I had my mic kind of off to the side there. She's mic'd up now. Mic'd up, Buttercup. 56% are saying no. Does the double pass intercooler? That's one thing I want to change about the big dual core that I have for the that we run the turbo stuff on. So I just want to have I just want to make them ins and outs on the other side. The puppies are Brady and Bruno. I have a large watered air. Will water alone be enough for street cruising? Yeah, you have a big reservoir and then add ice for racing. Like I said, for the street, we have a secondary heat exchanger that's mounted in the front, big, cooler. The next tests I have coming up when I go down is that we're going to try to get the 2.2 working. I have to redo the cam test. And I also have that L83 down there that Brian Tooley sent me. Would you bother cooling fuel for the streetcar? I would only cool fuel on a carbureted application. It didn't seem to do anything on the EFI, although I heard some guys were dealing with vapor lock situations. And in that case, if the fuel was really heating up, which we don't have a problem with, then cooling it so that you don't get vapor lock situations. But there seems to be power gains from doing it with a carburetor, but there didn't seem to be with fuel injection. I haven't done anything on the 396 recently. Yeah, Ricky, that's exactly it. Bruno is he's the bully. I haven't done anything on the 2.2 because I haven't been back down to West Tech. But we think we know what we're going to try. And I think that I'm pretty sure that somebody down there has a scope, so we should be able to just take the distributor out and spin it and see what's going on. If not, I'm sure Sanchez has one. Barrel style intercooler versus a box. I don't know that there's going to be a difference in the shape, other than one being more restrictive than the other. That's what I would look at. I gain a little bit if I put ice packs on my fuel rail, but the gains are gone by the 8th mile. And what you're doing is not fuel related. The gain that you're getting is not fuel related. The gain that you're getting is from probably changing the temperature of the air or the intake manifold. In Las Vegas, I knew multiple IROCs with vapor lock. It wouldn't surprise me. We had that on our truck, but it was a carbureted one, and we had to put a a little, I think it was a power steering cooler or something that we used to cool the fuel going in, and that seemed to help. I can't wait to get the Omni back because I'm going to do some testing for the street so I can show you guys. We can see what's going on with actual data. We can log, I can put an air to water intercooler in place of the air to air, and then we can monitor the charge temperature in the manifold while we're driving around and what happens under boost and all of that stuff. And we can see the reality. I already know from the Sprint what happened with the Sprint, but we can show it with this car as well. Is there any way to cool air intake temps for an NA application? Yeah, you can run a dedicated cold air source outside the engine compartment is the first way. The other way that guys have done at Bonneville is they've actually used intercoolers on NA motors, but the way that they're doing it is they make the intercooler very, very big and they're drawing through it, but they have pressurized air feeding the intercooler because they have 200-mile-an-hour vehicle speeds. So you have a pressurized air source feeding the motor, which is good. And then also you're pressurizing, so it's not an airflow restriction, which you want to make sure that you don't have an airflow restriction in an NA application. So in those instances, that works very well. 140 horsepower at the tire, I think, on the Omni. Some weird curves though. And it did make over 200 at the tire with the stage 2 computer. An ice water chiller on an NA test is needed. I don't know how they have that not be an airflow restriction. SRD Motorsports. I don't understand. Was there something that you said before that tells me what you're talking about there? I know I'm sad the little Omni motor got hurt. Oh, about cooling the NA one? Yeah, the 2.2 in the Omni, the one that's in the Omni, they took it and ran some chassis dyno tests with it, but it hurt head gasket. We had head studs on the Omni. And the rating that they have for that, the 175, they limited torque production on that motor because at the factory boost rating, it will make more torque than that. James, what ambient air temperature do you encounter at Bonneville? It varies everywhere from 40 or 50 degrees all the way up to 100 degrees. It just depends. When we make the backup runs early in the morning, it can be very cold, which is nice, especially for a turbo motor. But again, you have to make sure that your tune is right because it's going to be making more power than it did on the day where it was 90 or 100, because it could be 90 or 100 out there during the heat of the day. But when you go out and you set a record and you go into impound, and all the people that set records get to go out first on the salt early the next morning, all the record setting cars get to go out and try to back their record up, because you have to do it twice, and you have to do it in the same mile marker. So you go out and make another run in the morning, and then if you equal, or if the average of the two is faster than the original record, then you have set a record. Are you asking me what the Civic weighs, Scott? Yeah, 8. They especially on the 2.5s, they limited torque production because of the transaxles. Fuel distribution aside, will single 4-barrel be better than port injection? Yeah, I have videos up on that. We ran it with a carburetor, with port injection, batch fire, port injection, sequential, with individual cylinder tuning, and and the charge cooling from the 4-barrel, introducing, or not just a 4-barrel, not just a carburetor, but also the 4-hole throttle bodies. If you were to do that, same thing, charge cooling adds power. Oh, the Omni, I don't think that they weigh very much. 22 or 2,400 pounds or something. Yeah, 2,200. They're pretty light. The interchiller call for scrapping or bypassing the heat exchanger, so I was hoping maybe a trunk tank or some volume would help. I watched one of the episodes of Street Outlaws last night. Some top 16 race that they did for $16,000, and then the all-wheel drive Honda worked everybody. It was pretty good. And the thing is that the guy was really cool. I mean, he wasn't all mouthy and attitudey like a lot of those guys can get. But it was an all-wheel drive Civic, and it was a turbo H series, is I think what they said it was, and it was pretty impressive. The thing would hook, and in second gear, the thing just freaking motored. I wonder if airflow restriction would still outweigh any gain of having colder air. In some instances, 110-degree outside temp passing through an intercooler. The problem is that you need to make the change in temperature great enough where it's beneficial. So if you just use ambient water going through an intercooler on an NA motor, you're not going to see anything other than a restriction. But you need to have, for the guys that are at Bonneville, they're running ice water in their NA motors through this intercooler, and then having pressurized air go through it. So there's a lot of science that went into making it work. It's fun watching Omnis autocross. They lift up the inside rear tire. The old VW Rabbit Cup racing that they had, the series with those, that every time the guys are trail braking in, they lift up that inside tire, and then the tire stops. That's how you know that they're on the brakes. A trunk system is carrying more weight and water than the horsepower gain could improve on a front wheel drive. What? Why on a front wheel drive? A Parrot V6 has two heads. Maybe the guys from TA Performance might know about those. On the Omni, you should do a turbo Suzuki Hayabusa. Nah. I think he's saying it will distribute the weight more evenly. I thought he was just talking about the power gain of the water system. At Bonneville, we put the 10-gallon cell in the tank, and it was front wheel drive. It worked perfect. But we don't care about what else is going on. We don't even care about the weight. In fact, we want the weight. Could you put an all-wheel drive system from a Caliber in the Omni? I would really love to have an all-wheel drive Omni. My ideal Omni would be, I want a stock one. I want the GLHS, and so I'll definitely have that. I would also like a T2 2.5 with an NA bottom end swapped in a Rampage. But if I was going to do like a racy Omni, I would like an all-wheel drive Omni with a turbo K-Series Honda in it. I think the all-wheel drive vans are, I think, what guys do in those. An Ariel Atom, yeah, with a V8 Hayabusa. Yep. How much power does the Honda stuff really get to the back? I don't know. I don't know about the all-wheel drive stuff. I just know that this Honda killed everybody out there, and those cars were the cars that he was racing were making lots of power. It's just that car hooked up. I mean, there's other cars hooked up fairly well. So a Civic and with an Omni body, yeah, it would be cool. I just want a K Series one because it's just so easy to make. Like you'd have to really struggle to make 600 horsepower at the tire in a 8-valve Omni motor. But if you were going to do, if you just put a turbo on a stock, K24, it would make 600. Looking forward to getting the T66 set up in my Eagle. That would be cool. For the L series motor, do you think that the non crossflow head is a disadvantage? Yes, it definitely is. In fact, I think the way to go there would be to run the exhaust under the motor and put the turbo on the other side. I think I've seen guys do that, and I want to do that on the engine dyno. How big of an effect does cooling fuel have on horsepower? Excuse me. Engine Masters did a big thing on that, and it was fairly effective, cooling the fuel on the carbureted stuff. I mean, you're not going to make 20 or 30 horsepower. You're going to make a little bit, but it's another area for you to look at. Do they make affordable slider clutches for the Omni? I don't know. Guys are drag racing them, so I don't know if they're using the SRT4 stuff, maybe. Lancia Stratos would be cool. Although I'd rather have a Delta Integrale. The thing that would be cool about an all-wheel drive one is that I'm not thinking so much when you go drag race, because when you go drag race, the track is usually prepped, and guys that are at the drag race usually have their cars prepped so that they hook and go. And so the advantage of all-wheel drive is less there. But on the street, that's where you kill guys on the street, because if you have traction, and even if they have 1,000,000 horsepower, it's usually worse if they don't have. If it's usually worse for them if they have an overabundance of power, because then they don't know how to drive it. They just nail it, and it goes up in smoke. And even if they can run you down on the big end, the race is always over like right away. Midwest Bayless is doing their K Series swap kits now for Lancia Scorpions. That would be cool. I like those little cars. Let me see how my. Oh, look at that! Wow, you just kind of just got all crazy and jumped all up on there, huh? Look at you. Now I bet you're going to come down. There's more money to be made. Steven, all of the OEMs would rather that you don't tune their stuff. Because people tune it and then break it and then want their warranty money. Is swapping direct injection heads to make the engine run high compression worth it? I don't know. Are you having trouble making power other ways besides going to such, extensive, elaborate changes? That seems like a lot of work. Went to drive a GTO at the dealership. They brought out an STI that I could smell raw gas from. Was it like a used one or something? I have seen the dual engine 4-wheel drive deal. It's very, very cool. It's legendary. Oh, I used one with mods. Okay. I mean, there's no all-wheel drive system that's going to go in and there's nothing from the factory that was designed for, hey, can we do like two-step launches on this thing with 1,000 horsepower? That none of the factory stuff is going to like that. . 427, you should just put lower compression in it and then add boost. Anyone here run solid subframe bushings? I did on my old Camaro. Dual engine stuff is, while it's cool, it would be really problematic. Maybe Audi with RS suffixes. Oh, maybe, yeah. What do they use in the, don't they run all-wheel drive? Are the twin turbo like Lambos that they do for half mile and standing mile stuff? Are those, because I know that those have to be 2,000 horsepower or something. Are they running all-wheel drives with those? Do rev limiters stress the valve train? Yes, I think that they do. Okay, we're going to close out our poll. 60% saying no. I think it does. I think a dual pass is not ideal. I want more cold water. I know some people have it in their head about the cooling thing. They want, okay, the water has to be in there long enough for it to transfer. On an intercooler, I want as much cold water as I can. Stockish all-wheel drive is not much tire on the half mile. Some of the Lambos keep the all-wheel drive. Some of the Audi R8 V10s do as well. Because making it power with some of those cars is not a problem, but putting it down is a whole nother thing. 2,000 horsepower is a lot to play with. I have another good subject for the 24-hour marathon. Stuff just comes to me. And on that note, it is time to go. You should test the Ford 3.7 V6 Cyclone engine. Mark Sanchez has one of those in a Mustang that has a little Pro Charger on it that does pretty well. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you guys tonight.